Canada's new government will rebuild, reinvest, and rearm the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm announcing today that Canada will achieve NATO's 2% of GDP target this year, half a decade ahead of schedule.
Canada just dropped a bombshell that has Pentagon officials scrambling. Prime Minister Mark Carney stood up and declared Canada will no longer send 3/4 of its defense spending to America. A $19 billion F-35 fighter jet contract under review. Canada joining the EU's $170 billion defense fund as the first non-European country ever. And $2 billion in defense contracts shifting to Europe, Australia, and South Korea. This isn't about one contract. This is Canada restructuring its entire military alliance away from the United States. December 2025. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening, why the Pentagon is in panic mode, and what this means for every Canadian watching this. Because while politicians talk about geopolitics, this affects your job prospects, your tax dollars, and Canada's ability to defend itself. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to understand the biggest shift in Canadian defense policy in 75 years. June 2025, PM Mark Carney announced, "We should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America. $9 billion increase in defense spending, moving Canada to 2% of GDP. $2 billion specifically allocated to diversify defense partnerships away from the United States." Think about that for a second. For decades, 75 cents of every Canadian defense dollar went to American companies. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics. Canadian taxpayers funding American corporations while Canada's own military fell apart. Now Carney is saying that era is over. Carney declared, "The United States is beginning to monetize its hegemony, charging for access to its markets and reducing its relative contributions to our collective security." Translation? Trump imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. Trump threatened to make Canada the 51st state. Trump launched an economic war while expecting Canada to keep buying American weapons with no kill switches, no guarantees, and total US control. That relationship just ended. Let me walk you through the contracts that are changing everything. March 2025, Canada's $19 billion contract to buy 88 F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin went under official review. Defense Minister Bill Blair, "We are not canceling the F-35 contract, but we need to do our homework given the changing environment." $19 billion. That's billion with a B. For 88 aircraft that would define Canada's Air Force for the next 30 years, Canada has already paid for the first 16 aircraft. Those are locked in, but financial penalties would likely apply if Ottawa backs out of the remaining 72 jets. Here's the part that should make you furious if you're Canadian. The US controls the F-35 source code and upgrades, giving Washington an effective kill switch on Canada's fighter jets. Canada would spend $19 billion on jets that America can remotely shut down. During a trade dispute, during a border disagreement, during any moment, Washington decides Canadian interests don't align with American interests. That's not defense procurement, that's vassalage. Carney has had discussions with French and British government officials about whether they could provide an alternative to the F-35 and whether that aircraft could be built in Canada. France's Rafale, Britain's Typhoon, Sweden's Saab Gripen, which has promised that assembly and maintenance would happen in Canada, not in Fort Worth, Texas, not in some Lockheed facility in Georgia, in Canada. Canadian workers, Canadian technology transfer, Canadian aerospace jobs. Now here's where this gets massive. December 2025, Canada joined the EU's Security Action for Europe, SAFE initiative, becoming the first non-European country to gain access. The fund provides access to $150 billion, $170 billion in EU-backed loans for defense procurement. $170 billion. Available to Canadian defense companies through cheap European loans. Canada's participation in SAFE will fill key capability gaps, expand markets for Canadian suppliers, and attract European defense investment into Canada, Carney stated. Think about what this means. European defense companies will now build factories in Canada, create jobs in Canada, transfer advanced military technology to Canada. Instead of Canadian tax dollars flowing to Lockheed Martin's headquarters in Maryland, that money circulates through Canadian communities, employs Canadian workers, and builds Canadian industrial capacity. Joint arms projects under SAFE must have 65% of components produced within EU nations, but partner countries like Canada could be granted exemptions. Canada is negotiating to build European military equipment on Canadian soil. Assembly lines in Ontario. Electronics manufacturing in Quebec. Component production across the prairies. This is industrial policy disguised as defense procurement. Here's the contract that absolutely blindsided Washington. Canada purchased an over-the-horizon radar system from Australia, Canberra's biggest ever defense export, worth approximately $6 billion. And it took the United States completely by surprise. $6 billion to Australia for Arctic radar coverage that monitors threats coming over the North Pole. The Pentagon assumed Canada would buy American radar systems from Raytheon or Northrop Grumman. Instead, Canada went to Australia, negotiated better technology at a better price, and sent the message, "We're shopping globally now." For decades, Canada operated on autopilot. Need fighter jets? Call Lockheed. Need missiles? Call Raytheon. Need ships? Call American shipyards. No competitive bidding, no comparison shopping. Just automatic American contracts because we're allies. That automatic relationship just died. Canada is now considering bids from both South Korea and a joint German-Norwegian partnership to purchase new submarines. South Korea builds some of the most advanced diesel-electric submarines in the world. Germany's ThyssenKrupp has decades of expertise. Norway offers cutting-edge technology. All three are offering technology transfer agreements and Canadian manufacturing partnerships. Compare that to buying American subs that come with zero tech transfer and total dependence on US supply chains. Now let me show you why this pivot was absolutely necessary. Carney laid out the brutal reality of Canada's military in June 2025. Our military infrastructure and equipment have aged, hindering our military preparedness, Carney stated. Only one of our 4 submarines is seaworthy. Less than half of our maritime fleet and land vehicles are operational. More broadly, we are too reliant on the United States. 1 submarine works, out of 4. Half the Navy's ships can't sail. Half the Army's vehicles don't run. Decades of buying American equipment left Canada with broken hardware that the United States wouldn't properly maintain or support. And when Canada needed parts or upgrades, American companies charged premium prices with long delays because Canada had no alternatives. That's what dependency looks like. That's what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket labeled American Defense Industrial Complex. The government is adding $9 billion in spending this year. The Canadian Coast Guard will now be part of the military. $560 million goes to expanding Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command and accelerating AI deployment. $1 billion goes to critical Arctic defense systems, over-the-horizon radar, joint support ships, underwater surveillance systems, and domestic ammunition production. Domestic ammunition production. Canadian factories making Canadian ammunition for Canadian forces, not relying on American supply chains that Washington can cut off during trade disputes or political disagreements. Carney linked the F-35 review directly to Trump's ongoing trade war against Canada. Trump's repeated threats to make Canada the 51st U.S. state infuriated Canadians, and Carney won the prime ministership specifically by promising to confront American aggression. When your neighbor threatens to annex your country while simultaneously demanding you buy their weapons they can remotely disable, you stop buying those weapons. This isn't complicated. We stood shoulder to shoulder with the Americans throughout the Cold War and in the decades that followed, as the United States played a predominant role on the world stage. Today, that predominance is a thing of the past, Carney declared. Now the United States is beginning to monetize its hegemony, charging for access to its markets and reducing its relative contributions to our collective security. America wants Canada to pay for everything while America contributes less. America threatens 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum while expecting Canada to keep buying F-35s and Patriot missiles. America talks about making Canada a state while demanding Canada fund American defense contractors. Total defense spending was projected at $53.4 billion this fiscal year. With Carney's investments, that number jumped to $62.7 billion, $9.3 billion increase in a single year. We will invest in new submarines, aircraft, ships, armed vehicles and artillery, as well as new radar, drones, and sensors to monitor the seafloor in the Arctic, Carney announced. And here's the critical part. October 2025. Canada created a new defense investment agency specifically to accelerate procurement and bolster Canada's domestic defense industry. The agency has an explicit mandate to empower Canadian companies to compete globally while investing in dual-use technologies. Canadian companies, building Canadian equipment, competing internationally. Instead of being subcontractors for Lockheed Martin, Canadian firms become prime contractors selling to allied nations. Canada hopes to sign a submarine contract by 2027. Building those submarines in Canadian shipyards could employ thousands in Halifax, Vancouver, or Victoria for decades. Here's what this means for you if you're watching this as a regular Canadian. If Canada builds fighter jets domestically, that's aerospace engineering jobs in Montreal and Toronto. If submarines are constructed in Canada, that's shipbuilding careers in Halifax and the Maritimes. If ammunition production happens domestically, that's manufacturing employment across the country. Instead of Lockheed Martin executives and shareholders profiting off Canadian taxpayer money, Canadian workers earn paychecks that get spent in Canadian communities. The trade-off? $9 billion in new defense spending means either higher taxes or reallocation from other government programs. In the short term, Canadians might pay more, but long term, if this spending builds genuine Canadian industrial capacity that generates employment, exports, and technological advancement, the return on investment could be substantial. There's also the security angle. Equipment without American kill switches means actual sovereignty. If Canada and the United States have a serious disagreement over Arctic boundaries, trade policy, or any other issue, Canada's military equipment keeps functioning. The F-35's America can remotely ground, not an issue if Canada flies Rafales or Gripens instead. The Pentagon is watching this transformation in absolute shock. For 75 years, Canada was the most reliable American ally. Geographically attached, culturally similar, economically integrated, militarily interoperable. Canada bought American weapons automatically, supported American military operations globally, and never questioned the relationship. That automatic alliance is over. That $19 billion F-35 contract might go to Sweden's Saab instead. Those submarines will probably come from Germany or South Korea, not Connecticut. That $6 billion radar system already went to Australia, not Raytheon. Canada is putting Canada first, building Canadian defense capabilities, creating Canadian jobs, establishing genuine sovereignty instead of dependence. This is December 2025. This is happening right now. And this story will define Canadian-American relations for the next generation.